Stop with the dramatic black woman act. The doctor's words hung in the air like poison as he silenced the screaming alarms with his thumb. In that sterile hallway, a woman begged for her life, while her baby's heartbeat faded into silence. Her husband stood watching, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched, a federal agent stripped of his badge, but not his memory. What the doctor didn't know was that every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every second of deadly delay was being cataloged by a mind trained to build unshakable cases. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about the quiet rage that changes everything. The last night, the fluorescent lights in the emergency room cast everything in shades of sickness: pale green walls, gray linoleum floors, the ashen undertone creeping across Naomi Ward's brown skin as another contraction tore through her body. It was just past midnight, that dead hour when the world feels both too quiet and too loud, when every sound echoes with a sharpness that cuts. Elias held his wife's hand, feeling her fingers crush his with a strength born of desperation. 8 months pregnant, glowing just yesterday, planning the nursery colors and debating baby names over breakfast. Now her eyes were wide with a fear that made his chest constrict, because Naomi didn't scare easily. She was the woman who'd stared down community board meetings and hostile administrators without flinching. If she was afraid, something was genuinely wrong. "This isn't normal," she gasped, her other hand pressed hard against her swollen belly. "Elias, it feels like something's tearing inside me." He wanted to fix this, to make it stop, to use his FBI training to somehow control a situation that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. But all he could do was squeeze her hand and look desperately toward the intake desk where Nurse Tessa Glenn was arguing in low, urgent tones with someone on the phone. "Blood pressure's climbing," Tessa said, glancing at the portable monitor. Her experienced hands moved quickly, efficiently, but her eyes betrayed worry. "We need to get her assessed immediately." A doctor finally appeared, moving with the kind of unhurried confidence that comes from power never questioned. Dr. Preston Hargrove barely glanced at the chart in his hands, his eyes skating over Naomi with the disinterest of someone evaluating a minor inconvenience. "Mrs. Ward, is it?" His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of bedside manner that sounded caring but felt hollow. "First pregnancy jitters are perfectly normal. Nothing to worry about."
"No."
Naomi shook her head, tears forming. "This is different. I've read everything about normal labor. Something's wrong. It's like something's ripping apart inside." Hargrove's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Anxiety often manifests as physical symptoms, especially in certain populations who may not be as familiar with proper prenatal care. The words landed like a slap. Elias felt his jaw tighten, felt every instinct scream that this man had just made a judgment based on nothing but the color of his wife's skin. But he forced his voice to stay measured, professional, the way he'd learned to do in 1,000 tense situations where a black man's anger could be weaponized against him. "Doctor, we've followed every recommendation," he said carefully. "My wife has had excellent prenatal care. Something is genuinely wrong." Nurse Tessa stepped forward, her voice firm but deferential in that way hospital staff learn when contradicting doctors. "Dr. Hargrove, her BP is 160/95 and rising. Maybe we should." "Thank you, Nurse Glenn." Hargrove's tone dropped several degrees, dismissal wrapped in politeness. "I believe I can assess my own patients." The clicking of heels announced another presence. Gail Renshaw, the hospital administrator, appeared with a kind of timing that suggested she'd been monitoring the situation. Her suit was pressed, her hair perfect despite the hour, every inch of her radiating corporate efficiency. "Dr. Hargrove, I trust everything is under control?" Her smile was professional, but her eyes were calculating. "We need to maintain our excellent emergency response metrics." "Just a nervous mother-to-be," Hargrove assured her, waving a hand as if brushing away smoke. "Nothing that warrants disrupting our protocols." Elias watched them wheel Naomi to a spot in the hallway, underneath flickering fluorescent lights that made her look even more fragile. A thin curtain provided the barest illusion of privacy. Through the gap, He could see empty delivery rooms, their doors closed, their beds pristine and waiting. His FBI training was screaming at him, document everything, note the timeline, recognize the pattern of dismissal and delay. But he was also just a husband watching his wife suffer, feeling the terrible weight of knowing that any aggressive advocacy could be twisted into threatening behavior, could get him removed from her side when she needed him most. "I'm right here, baby," he whispered, pressing his lips to her forehead as another wave of pain made her arch against the thin mattress. "I've got you." But even as he said it, he felt the lie in the words. Because he didn't have her, not really. She was trapped in a system that had already decided her pain didn't matter, her fear wasn't valid, her life wasn't worth disrupting the smooth efficiency of hospital metrics and insurance protocols. The fetal monitor beeped steadily beside them, numbers climbing in ways that should have triggered immediate response. Elias watched those numbers with the focus of someone trained to read patterns in chaos, to see the story data was telling before anyone else recognized the threat. Naomi's grip on his hand tightened suddenly, her body going rigid. "Elias," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't feel the baby moving anymore." The monitor's alarm began to pulse, its urgent beeping cutting through the ambient noise of the emergency room. Elias looked toward the nurse's station, expecting someone to respond with the kind of urgency that alarm demanded. But Dr. Hargrove simply reached over and pressed a button. The alarm went silent mid-scream, the warning lights fading as if they'd never existed. "Equipment malfunction," he said dismissively, not even looking at Naomi's face, now slick with sweat and pale with terror. "These hallway monitors are notoriously unreliable." Elias stared at the silent machine, at his wife's frightened eyes, at the doctor already turning away. In that moment, he understood with perfect, terrible clarity that this wasn't just negligence or bias or even malice. This was a system built to let women like his wife die, and it was operating exactly as designed. The scream that tore from Naomi's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a body breaking, of something fundamental going catastrophically wrong. The monitors that Hargrove hadn't silenced exploded into chaos, alarms shrieking, numbers plummeting and spiking in patterns that meant only one thing: crisis. Code blue. Nurse Tessa slammed her palm against the emergency call button, her other hand flying across the equipment. "We need help here now." Dr. Hargrove sauntered over with the kind of irritation reserved for minor inconveniences. He reached past Tessa with practiced ease and silenced the screaming alarms one by one, his face a mask of professional annoyance. "These readings are clearly false," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "The equipment in the hallway can be unreliable. There's no need for dramatics." "False." Elias grabbed the doctor's arm, his carefully maintained control finally fracturing. "Look at her. She's dying." Hargrove's eyes went cold. "Remove your hand from me." "Security. She needs imaging now," Elias insisted, releasing the doctor but blocking his path. "Get a surgeon down here. Something's torn inside her. Can't you see the blood? Mr. Ward." Hargrove's voice dripped with condescension. "Your emotional state is not helping your wife. Perhaps you should step outside and let the professionals work." "Professional?" The word came out like broken glass. "You haven't done a single thing to help her." Naomi's body jerked again, her back arching off the bed as her oxygen levels crashed. Blood was soaking through the thin hospital sheet now, spreading in a dark stain that couldn't be ignored or explained away. A young resident in rumpled scrubs rushed over, his face pale with recognition of what he was seeing. "Dr. Hargrove, her stats are critically low. Should I call for Dr. Parker? We need." "Are you questioning my assessment of this situation?" Hargrove cut him off, his voice sharp as a scalpel. The resident's mouth opened and closed. His eyes darted between Naomi's convulsing form and his superior's cold stare. "No, sir, but protocol states." "I am the protocol in this department." Each word fell like ice. "Stand down." Nurse Tessa's hands moved desperately over Naomi's body, trying to stabilize vitals that were spiraling beyond control. "She's hemorrhaging, doctor. Please." "This is textbook placental abruption. She needs surgery now, or she's going to." This is what happens when we let hysteria override medical judgment, Hargrove interrupted, making a show of checking his watch. If you're all quite finished with this performance. Naomi's body went rigid. More blood, too much blood, spreading across the bed and beginning to drip onto the sterile floor. The resident took half a step forward, medical training warring with career preservation, then froze as Hargrove's glare pinned him in place. Do something, Elias roared, his composure finally shattering completely. Security guards materialized at both ends of the hallway, hands on their radios, bodies tensed for confrontation. Gail Renshaw appeared beside them like a ghost in expensive clothing, her professional smile strained but firmly in place. "Mr. Ward, please lower your voice," she said with practiced calm. "This is a hospital." "It's a slaughterhouse," Tessa snapped, her hands pressed against Naomi's abdomen where blood continued to seep. "Doctor, she needs an or now. We're losing her." The numbers on the remaining monitors told a story in stark digital clarity. Blood pressure crashing. Heart rate erratic. Oxygen saturation dropping into ranges incompatible with consciousness, with life. Naomi's eyes fluttered, her grip on Elias's hand going terrifyingly slack. Her lips moved, forming words without sound, and Elias leaned close to hear what might be his wife's last words. "Baby," she breathed. "Save our baby." "Fine." Hargrove finally waved a dismissive hand, as if granting a favor rather than acknowledging an emergency. "Call it in. But note my objection to this overreaction in the chart." The next moments dissolved into controlled chaos. A trauma team materialized, shouting orders that should have been given 20 minutes ago. The young resident found his courage too late, barking for blood products and an operating room with the desperate energy of someone trying to undo his earlier silence. Nurse Tessa rattled off vitals as they wheeled Naomi away, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. BP 70/40, pulse thready at 140, massive hemorrhage, patient unresponsive. Elias tried to follow, but security blocked his path. Through the gaps between their bodies, he watched the team racing his wife down the corridor, blood dripping from the gurney onto pristine floor tiles, leaving a trail like breadcrumbs in a nightmare. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it was only seconds that felt eternal. Elias stood in that hallway, his hands sticky with Naomi's blood, his mind cataloging every detail with the detached precision of his training, while his heart shattered into pieces too small to ever fully reassemble. The young resident emerged from the operating room eventually. His scrubs were stained dark red, the color of life spilled carelessly. His face had aged a decade in the time it took to try saving what couldn't be saved. "The baby?" Elias heard himself ask, his voice coming from somewhere far away. The resident swallowed hard. "We got her out. She's critical but stable." "The neonatal team," his voice cracked. "They're good. She's got a chance." Hope flickered, weak but alive. "And my wife." The resident's eyes filled with tears. He shook his head once, a small movement that contained an entire universe of loss. The world stopped turning. Sound became muffled, distant, as if Elias were suddenly underwater. Through the haze, he saw Dr. Hargrove at the nurse's station, calmly dictating notes into a recording device, his white coat still pristine, his composure unshaken. Patient presented with anxiety symptoms consistent with first-time pregnancy. Hargrove's voice carried clearly down the hall. Despite appropriate interventions and careful monitoring, complications arose unexpectedly. Given the patient's presentation and underlying circumstances, death was an unavoidable outcome. Something inside Elias snapped. He lunged forward, a sound like a wounded animal tearing from his throat. Security caught him before he could reach Hargrove, muscled arms pinning him against the wall with practiced efficiency. "Sir, calm down or we'll have to remove you," one guard warned. "My wife is dead." Elias's voice cracked, raw with grief and rage. He killed her. He stood there and killed her while she begged for help. "Now, Mr. Ward." Hargrove straightened his white coat, finally looking directly at Elias with eyes completely empty of remorse. These situations are always tragic, but histrionics won't change the medical reality. Perhaps if she'd been more compliant with prenatal care recommendations. You son of a... Elias struggled against the guard's grip, every FBI protocol about maintaining composure forgotten in the face of this casual cruelty. Remove him, Gail Renshaw ordered crisply. And call the police if necessary. We can't have this kind of disruption in a medical facility. The guards began dragging Elias toward the exit. He stopped fighting, his body suddenly heavy with grief and exhaustion, and something darker, something colder crystallizing beneath the pain. With careful, deliberate movements, he reached for his wallet. The guards tensed, probably expecting a phone or some kind of weapon. But what Elias withdrew was something else entirely, something that changed the equation completely. A black leather credential case. It fell open in his hand, revealing a golden badge that caught the fluorescent light, and beneath it, 3 letters that carried the weight of federal authority. FBI. The guard's grips loosened slightly. Hargrove's self-satisfied expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been uncertainty. Special Agent Elias Ward, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the tears tracking down his face. Federal Bureau of Investigation. He looked directly at Hargrove, memorizing the doctor's face, cataloging every detail of this moment. This isn't over, he said softly. Gail Renshaw recovered quickly, her PR training kicking in. That changes nothing, Agent Ward. Your personal tragedy doesn't give you authority to assault hospital staff or disrupt operations. I'm very sorry for your loss, but my loss. Elias tasted the words, bitter as poison. You mean my wife. Her name was Naomi. And you're right. My badge doesn't give me the right to assault anyone. He straightened his jacket, wiped his face, became the federal agent rather than the grieving husband. But it does give me the authority to investigate patterns of neglect, discrimination, and suspicious deaths in federally funded medical facilities. He looked at each of them in turn. Hargrove, Renshaw, the security guards, the resident whose eyes showed he understood exactly what was coming. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. The automatic doors slid open behind him. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gray that matched the hollowness in his chest. Somewhere in this building, his daughter was fighting to live, a life that started with her mother's death, a future stolen before it even began. Elias walked out into the morning, his badge pressed against his heart, his wife's blood still on his hands. Behind him, the hospital continued its work, machines beeping, staff moving, life and death cycling through like it always did. But something had changed in that building tonight. They'd underestimated the quiet man watching his wife die. They'd assumed his grief would be the end of the story. They were wrong. It was only the beginning. Dawn crept through Elias's kitchen windows, painting gray shadows across the linoleum floor where Naomi had danced just days ago, humming old Motown songs while she made breakfast. The baby's cries pierced through the memory, dragging him back to a present where those moments were already becoming ghosts. I'm coming, sweetheart, he called softly, his voice rough from hours of crying and not enough sleep. He moved toward the nursery on autopilot, his body functioning while his mind kept replaying Naomi's last moments, the blood, the monitors, Hargrove's dismissive face. The room still smelled of fresh paint and new furniture. Naomi had insisted on doing it herself, even 8 months pregnant. Our daughter needs a room filled with love, she'd said, not hired hands. He lifted the baby from the crib, cradling her against his chest. She was so small, so perfect, Naomi's nose and chin, his eyes and stubborn expression already forming in that tiny face. There you go, sweet pea. Daddy's got you. The words felt hollow without Naomi's gentle harmony beside him, without her sure hands showing him how to support the head properly, how to read the different cries, and what they meant. His phone buzzed while he was warming a bottle. An email from Gail Renshaw's office, timestamp 5:47 a.m. Subject line, confidential settlement proposal, time sensitive. They sure move fast when they're scared, he muttered to his daughter, who blinked up at him with those dark, serious eyes that seemed to understand more than a newborn should. Back at the kitchen table, baby dozing in her swing, Elias spread out the discharge papers that had been delivered to his doorstep in a manila envelope. They shouldn't exist. You don't discharge dead people. But here they were anyway, a sanitized version of events that bore only passing resemblance to what actually happened. The timeline was wrong. According to these documents, the fetal monitor showed normal readings until 12:45 a.m. But Elias remembered those alarms going off well before midnight. The nursing notes mentioned routine checks during periods when Naomi had been screaming in pain. Someone had scrubbed these records clean, carefully editing out the evidence of negligence. But they'd made mistakes. Timestamps on medication orders didn't match electronic system logs. Notes appeared chronologically impossible, treatments documented before symptoms were recorded. His FBI training kicked in, that cold analytical part of his brain that could function even when his heart was broken. He started making lists, creating timelines, noting discrepancies. A heavy knock at the door made him look up. Through the peephole, he saw Detective Vince Malloy on his porch, looking casual in plain clothes with a paper coffee cup in hand. The kind of visit designed to seem friendly, neighborly, nothing official about it. Elias opened the door, but blocked the entrance. "Detective, it's early. Just checking in." Malloy's smile was practiced, reasonable. "Heard there was some excitement at the hospital last night. Thought we should talk, keep things from escalating." "Nothing to talk about. My wife died because a doctor ignored her symptoms." "Look." Malloy's voice dropped, friendly but firm. "I get it. You're hurting. But Dr. Hargrove's got a 30-year record of excellence. These things happen sometimes, especially with high-risk pregnancies. Best thing for everyone is to accept reality and let the healing start." "Is that what you tell all the families of his victims?" Malloy's smile tightened. "Careful, Agent Ward. Grief's one thing, but accusations like that can cause problems for everyone involved. You've got a little girl in there who needs her daddy. Maybe focus on that instead of chasing ghosts that'll only bring more pain." Behind them, the TV news anchor's voice drifted from Elias's kitchen. Respected obstetrician Dr. Preston Hargrove expressed deep sadness today over the loss of a patient during childbirth. They both turned to watch. Hargrove stood at a podium, his face arranged in practiced concern. "While we cannot discuss specific cases due to privacy regulations, it's important to understand that complications can arise even with the best care, particularly in patients with pre-existing risk factors and noncompliance with prenatal recommendations." "Son of a," Elias breathed. "He's blaming her." "Take the settlement," Malloy advised quietly. "Go be a father to your little girl. Some doors, once opened, don't close so easy. And sometimes people get hurt trying to force them." The threat was subtle but clear. Elias met the detective's eyes and saw the calculation there. How much pressure would it take to make this grieving agent back down? Accept the money. Let the system protect itself. "Thanks for stopping by, Detective," Elias said evenly. "But I need to get back to my daughter." After Malloy left, Elias turned his dining room wall into an investigation board. Sticky notes marked every interaction, every delayed response, every dismissed warning. Red string connected key moments. 11:17 p.m. Naomi's first complaint of severe pain. 11:42 p.m. Tessa's request for imaging denied. 12:04 a.m. Blood pressure spike documented. 12:17 a.m. Resident suggests intervention, overruled. 12:53 a.m. Final crash, emergency surgery ordered. 1:34 a.m. Time of death. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Sending something important. Delete after reading. TG. Tessa Glenn's email contains scanned pages from old patient files. 2 cases, both Black mothers, both died under Hargrove's care in the past year. The patterns were identical. Symptoms dismissed, care delayed, alarms ignored until too late. Elias added their names to his wall in black marker. Jasmine Holloway, age 24, died March 15, 2024. Keisha Martinez, age 29, died September 2, 2024. Naomi Ward, age 31, died December 23, 2024. More red string, more connections. Not isolated incidents. A pattern. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number he rarely used. A USA Layla Moreno, a prosecutor he'd worked with on civil rights cases. She answered on the third ring. "It's Ward," he said quietly. "I need a meeting." Off the books. A pause. "I heard about your wife." "Elias, I'm so sorry. Can you meet? Please." Another pause, longer this time. "The diner on 4th Street. 1 hour." "But, Elias, if this is what I think it is, there are proper channels." "Channels protect the powerful," he interrupted, looking at his wall of evidence. "This needs to be different." After hanging up, Elias stood before his timeline. The pattern was clear now, not just negligence or unconscious bias, but something colder, more deliberate. Each death followed the same choreography of delay and denial. Each victim fit the same profile. Each family had been offered settlements that required silence. He uncapped a marker and wrote one word at the top of his board in large letters. Intent. The baby stirred in her swing, making soft sounds of hunger or discomfort. Elias lifted her carefully, breathing in that sweet newborn scent that was all innocence and promise. "I'm sorry, sweet pea," he whispered against her soft hair. "Sorry you'll grow up without your mama. Sorry the world is like this. But I promise you something," his voice hardened with determination. "They won't bury this one. They won't make your mama just another statistic, another unfortunate complication they can explain away." He looked at the settlement offer on his kitchen table, a substantial sum, enough to ensure his daughter's future, with only one requirement: complete silence and a legal release absolving the hospital and all staff of any wrongdoing. Blood money. Payment for looking away. Elias picked up the papers and methodically fed them through his office shredder, watching the legal language turn into confetti. The sound was satisfying, final. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Metropolitan General Hospital announces comprehensive review of maternal care protocols following tragic patient outcome. Translation: they were already in damage control mode, preparing defenses, building walls. But Elias had spent his career breaking through walls and exposing what people tried to hide. He knew how to follow money, how to find patterns in data, how to turn whispers into testimony and suspicions into prosecutable facts. They thought his grief would make him weak, that his badge suspension would make him powerless, that their lawyers and connections would make them untouchable. They were wrong on every count. Elias looked at his daughter, then at his wall of evidence, then at the shredded settlement offer scattered like snow across his office floor. "Not this time," he said softly. "Not this time." The abandoned storage facility loomed against the midnight sky, its corrugated metal walls groaning in the cold wind. Elias pulled his car behind a rusted shipping container, cutting the engine. His breath fogged in the December air as he waited, watching shadows for movement. A figure emerged from the darkness. Razor, Delaney, leather jacket collar turned up, moving with the cautious grace of someone who'd spent years looking over his shoulder. The former criminal informant had helped Elias on half a dozen cases, always for a price, always with one foot ready to run. "You're a hard man to find these days, Fed," Razor said, keeping his distance until he'd scanned the perimeter. "Not a Fed right now," Elias replied. "Badge is suspended." Razor's laugh was sharp and humorless. "That's what makes this interesting. You're calling in favors when you got nothing to trade. I've still got friends in place. Protection's available if the information's good." "Protection?" Razor shook his head. "Man, you don't even know what you're poking at. These people, they've got reach you wouldn't believe. Judges, cops, half the city council probably." Elias stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "They killed my wife, Razor, while I watched. Tell me what you know." Something in his tone made Razor study him more carefully. The informant had seen Elias angry before, seen him determined, but this was different. This was grief hardened into something unbreakable. "Follow me," Razor said finally. "But if anyone asks, we never had this conversation." They wound through a maze of storage units until they reached a nondescript door marked maintenance. Inside, Ancient fluorescent lights flickered over rows of servers humming in climate-controlled racks. "Hospital's dirty little secret," Razor explained, gesturing at the equipment. "When they need records to disappear during routine system migrations, this is where the real data sits. I did some contract work for their IT department. Off the books, of course. Who has access? That's the beautiful part." Razor pulled out his phone, showing Elias a screenshot of access logs. "They think they wiped the login records, but I keep backups. See these entries? Right after your wife." He stopped, reading Elias's expression. "Right after that night, someone was in here scrubbing files. Multiple accounts, all with admin privileges. Show me everything." For the next hour, Razor walked him through the hospital's shadow system, how records were altered, where originals were stored, which administrators had privileged access. Names and timestamps matched Elias's timeline perfectly. More importantly, they revealed 2 other similar incidents in the past 18 months, both handled the same way. "This is enough to start building a case," Elias said, taking notes with mechanical precision. "But I need copies." "Already ahead of you." Razor handed over a small external drive. "But listen, this goes beyond just the hospital. I've seen municipal accounts, police records, judges' signatures on things that shouldn't exist. They've got a whole network protecting each other." "I can protect you," Elias promised. "I may be suspended, but I've got an AUSA who—" His phone buzzed. A text from Layla Moreno. "Limited surveillance, Warren approved. 48 hours only. Use it wisely." Before he could respond, another message flashed across his screen from an unknown number. "Nurse Glenn found unconscious at home. Memorial Hospital ER. Suspected robbery." "I have to go," Elias said sharply, pocketing the drive. "Watch your back," Razor called after him. "They don't like loose ends." Elias broke every speed limit getting to Memorial Hospital. He found Tessa Glenn in the ER, her face bruised and swollen, consciousness flickering in and out. According to the intake notes, her house had been broken into. Nothing taken except her phone and laptop. "Wasn't random," she managed to whisper when she saw him, reaching for his hand with fingers that trembled. 2 men, professional, knew exactly what they wanted. "Did you recognize them?" She tried to shake her head, winced. Careful not to show faces. "But one of them, he had a hospital contractor badge. I saw it when his jacket opened." Her eyes fluttered closed as the morphine took hold. Elias stayed until she fell asleep, then found the attending physician. "She's lucky," the doctor said. "Concussion, some bruising, but nothing permanent. Could have been much worse." Detective Malloy was already there, leaning against the nurse's station with calculated casualness, as if his presence at midnight in a hospital 40 minutes from his jurisdiction was perfectly natural. "Terrible thing," he drawled when he saw Elias. "City's getting dangerous. Even nice neighborhoods aren't safe anymore." "Cut the act," Elias growled. "We both know what this is." "Careful, Ward." Malloy's friendly mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something colder underneath. "Suspended agents shouldn't interfere with active investigations. Bad things happen when people don't mind their own business." "Is that what happened to my wife?" "She didn't mind her own business?" "Your wife had complications. Tragic, but natural." Malloy straightened his jacket. "Unlike some other recent events. Think about your kid, Ward. Some losses you can't come back from." Elias watched him leave, fury burning cold in his chest. The threat was clear: back off or lose more than you already have. His phone buzzed again. Moreno, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "I've got 48 hours of surveillance authorization. That's it. Make it count." "I need more time." "You need to be careful," she countered. "They're sending messages, Elias. First the attempted arson on your wife's car, now Nurse Glenn. They're escalating. Then we need to move faster." Elias described what Razor had shown him. "The evidence is there, Layla. We just need to get to it legally. Evidence won't help if you're dead. Or if someone else gets hurt because you push too hard." Elias looked through the window at Tessa's unconscious form. She tried to help, To do the right thing, just like Naomi had tried to advocate for herself. The system's response was the same, swift, brutal silencing. "No one else gets hurt," he said quietly. "I swear it." "How can you promise that?" "Because I'm done playing by their rules." He touched the hard drive in his pocket. "They want to send messages? Fine. Let's send one back." Elias. 48 hours. He cut her off. "That's all I need. Have a team ready." He ended the call and went back into Tessa's room. A nurse was checking her vitals, adjusting the 4, noting the pattern of bruises that told a story of targeted violence meant to frighten, not kill. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her still form. "This ends now. No one else pays for their crimes." Through the window, dawn was breaking over the city in shades of gray and gold. Somewhere in that light, Hargrove was probably sleeping peacefully in his expensive house. Malloy was filing false reports. Hospital administrators were crafting their next cover-up. They thought fear and violence would protect their system forever. In 48 hours, Elias would prove them wrong. He just hoped the price wouldn't be paid in more innocent blood. The surveillance van's air conditioning hummed steadily, a white noise backdrop to the tension crackling through the cramped space. Elias watched multiple screens showing different angles of Metropolitan General Hospital's entrance, his hands steady on the monitoring equipment despite the storm churning in his gut. Audio check. Layla Moreno's voice came through his earpiece, crisp and professional. "Receiving clearly," he responded, adjusting levels. Every rustle from the tiny microphone hidden in Simone Brooks' clothing came through with perfect clarity. Simone was perfect for this. A trained federal operative who'd worked undercover for years, unflappable and precise. More importantly, she was 32 weeks pregnant with her second child, far enough along to make the scenario believable, not far enough to put herself or the baby at real risk. She'd volunteered immediately when Moreno explained the operation. "If what you're saying is true," she'd said, her hand resting protectively on her belly, "then this needs to stop. Today." Now Elias watched her approach the hospital entrance through the cameras, one hand pressed against her stomach, her face showing calculated distress. Not too dramatic, just a worried pregnant woman seeking help. Exactly like Naomi had been. The thought twisted like a knife, but he pushed it down. This wasn't about revenge. It was about evidence, about building an unshakable case, about making sure Hargrove's pattern was documented so clearly that no lawyer or administrator could explain it away. Simone pushed through the yard doors. The waiting room was typical afternoon chaos. Crying children, coughing adults, phones ringing at the intake desk. She approached the triage nurse, her voice trembling in just the right way. "I need help. Something's wrong. The pain, it's not normal." Through the hidden microphone, every word came through clearly. Elias's hands tightened on the equipment as he heard the familiar routine begin. "Let's get your vitals," the nurse said, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around Simone's arm. A pause, then concern entering her voice. Blood pressures elevated. 160/95. The same numbers. The same warning signs. They wheeled Simone to an exam area. Through her microphone, Elias heard everything. The squeak of rubber-soled shoes, the beep of monitors, the murmur of staff discussing which doctor was on rotation. "Dr. Hargrove's handling OB emergencies today," someone said. Elias and Moreno exchanged glances. Perfect. Terrifying, but perfect. Patient presenting with severe abdominal pain at 32 weeks, a voice reported, probably a nurse documenting the intake. Complaining of vision changes and dizziness. They'd chosen the symptoms carefully, serious enough to require immediate attention, matching Naomi's case, but not severe enough to put Simone in actual danger. A delicate balance. Dr. Aiden Park appeared first, the young resident who'd been there the night Naomi died, whose testimony had been quietly damning during preliminary depositions. Through the security feed Moreno had tapped into, Elias could see him examining Simone, his face thoughtful and concerned. "Let's get a full workup," Park said clearly. "This BP is concerning. We should." Now. Hargrove's familiar voice cut through like a blade wrapped in silk. "Let's not overreact. Elias felt his jaw clench as the doctor swept into view on the monitor, radiating that same dismissive confidence. "Good afternoon," Hargrove said to Simone. "I understand you're feeling anxious." "The pain," Simone said, her performance flawless. "It's like something's tearing. And I can't see right. Everything's blurry." Hargrove's tone dripped condescension. "First pregnancy?" "No, my second. But this isn't normal. Something's wrong." "Pain tolerance varies significantly among different demographics," Hargrove said, as if reciting from a script he'd used many times before. "What you're experiencing is likely stress-related. These concerns often appear more severe than they actually are." In the van, Moreno's pen scratched rapidly across her notepad. Every word was another nail in Hargrove's coffin. "Her pressure's still climbing," Park interjected, his voice firmer than it had been the night Naomi died. "Protocol suggests." "Thank you, Dr. Park." Hargrove cut him off. "I believe I can assess my own patients." Gail Renshaw materialized at the nurse's station, her presence no accident. Through various cameras, Elias watched her subtle gestures, directing traffic, managing optics, keeping the machine running smoothly. "Please," Simone said, genuine worry creeping into her voice now. "Can you do some tests? An ultrasound? Just to be sure?" "Let's not waste resources," Hargrove replied smoothly. "Some quiet rest will help more than unnecessary imaging. These symptoms are quite common in certain populations who may be less familiar with normal pregnancy progression." There was the casual racism wrapped in medical terminology, the assumption that Black and brown women exaggerated pain, lacked knowledge, needed to be managed rather than heard. "BP's 170 over 100 now," a nurse called out. Park straightened his spine, and Elias could almost see the moment he decided. "With respect, Dr. Hargrove, elevated blood pressure combined with vision changes and severe pain meets criteria for immediate evaluation. I'm ordering a protein test and ultrasound." "Absolutely not." Hargrove's voice sharpened. "I won't have my authority questioned by—" "It's protocol," Park interrupted louder now. "And I'm documenting my recommendation in the chart." The word, documenting, changed everything. Hargrove knew the power of paper trails, knew that if anything went wrong after a documented recommendation was ignored, he'd be liable. "Fine," he said tightly. "Order your tests. Waste time and resources. But note that I consider this an overreaction to standard discomfort, likely psychosomatic in nature." In the van, Moreno looked up from her notes, her eyes bright with vindication. "He's repeating the exact pattern. Dismissing symptoms, resisting tests, documenting his objections to cover himself, while pushing the racist subtext that certain patients exaggerate pain. And it's all recorded," Elias added grimly. "Every word, every dismissal, every assumption." Through the monitors, they watched Park efficiently arrange the tests he'd demanded. Simone remained perfectly in character, worried but cooperative, insistent but not combative, exactly how any reasonable pregnant woman would behave when something felt wrong. "Your pressure's still elevated," Park told her, his voice gentle. "But the initial tests look reassuring. We'll monitor you closely, and I want to run a few more checks to be absolutely certain everything's okay with you and the baby." "Such drama for nothing," Hargrove commented, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "As I said, anxiety presents differently in certain populations. Perhaps some education on proper prenatal care would be beneficial rather than rushing to emergency interventions for every perceived discomfort." The condescension in his voice made Elias's hands curl into fists. But the rage was tempered by cold satisfaction. Every word was another piece of irrefutable evidence. "Patient seems stable now," Park said carefully, more for the record than for Hargrove's benefit. "But given the symptoms and elevated vitals, I'm keeping her for observation." "On your head be it," Hargrove replied dismissively. "Document that I advised against unnecessary admission. These resources could be used for patients with genuine medical needs." "Oh, I'll document everything," Park assured him, his meaning clear to everyone but Hargrove. "Very thoroughly." Gail Renshaw drifted closer, her practiced smile masking concern. "Dr. Hargrove, May I have a word about resource allocation and— Of course, Hargrove interrupted. Someone needs to maintain standards around here. Their voices faded as they moved away from Simone's bedside, but the microphone caught their retreating conversation. These people need to learn they can't demand special treatment every time they feel uncomfortable, Hargrove was saying. We have protocols for a reason, and emotional responses shouldn't override medical judgment. The next thing you know, we'll have every nervous mother demanding imaging and specialists for normal pregnancy symptoms. Moreno clicked her pen decisively and turned to Elias, her eyes hard with certainty. He just confessed, she said quietly. Not just to what happened with your wife, but to everything. The pattern, the prejudice, the deliberate denial of care based on race. We've got him. Elias stared at the monitors showing Simone resting comfortably while Park supervised her care, the care Naomi should have received, the attention that might have saved her life. Yes, he said softly. Now we do. Through the speakers, Hargrove's voice continued in the background, complaining to Renshaw about overly dramatic patients and junior doctors who don't understand efficient resource management. Every word dug his grave deeper. In the van, Elias allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. They'd given Hargrove exactly what he wanted. Another black woman presenting with concerning symptoms, another opportunity to display his casual cruelty and racist assumptions. And this time, every second of it was recorded, documented, and admissible in court. The trap had worked perfectly. The garage light cast harsh shadows across Elias's evidence wall as he gently swayed his sleeping child against his chest. Hargrove's recorded voice played through a small speaker, each word dripping with casual cruelty. These people need to learn they can't demand special treatment every time they feel uncomfortable. Elias pressed the button, rewinding the clip. He'd listened to it 17 times now, memorizing every inflection, every pause that revealed the doctor's true nature. The wall before him was a spider's web of connections, time-stamped photos, financial records, transcribed conversations. Red string linked key events, forming a noose that would finally end Hargrove's reign of negligence. The baby stirred, tiny fingers clutching Elias's shirt. He adjusted the blanket, remembering how Naomi used to hum while folding these same soft fabrics, preparing for a future that Hargrove had stolen. His phone buzzed. Moreno's text was brief. Warrants drafted. Filing at dawn. A car door slammed outside. Through the garage window, Elias spotted Detective Malloy's unmarked Crown Victoria idling at the curb, exhaust puffing white in the cold air. He secured his daughter in the portable crib tucked behind his desk and switched off the audio playback. The doorbell rang. Elias took his time answering, letting Malloy stew in the December cold. Evening, Agent Ward, Malloy said when the door finally opened. His smile was practiced, professional, the kind that never reached his eyes. Got a minute to chat? No warrant, no chat, Elias replied flatly. Come on now. Malloy's voice stayed friendly, but his stance shifted subtly, a cop's instinct to establish dominance. Just looking out for your interests here. Professional courtesy between law enforcement. There's nothing professional about this visit. Listen. Malloy dropped the pretense, stepping closer. You're pushing buttons that don't need pushing. Making waves that could drown more than just Hargrove. Be smart. Think about your kid. Elias felt ice crystallize in his veins. Are you threatening my child, detective? Of course not. Malloy spread his hands innocently. Just saying, life's unpredictable. Accidents happen. Single fathers have a hard time sometimes. Would be a shame if your crusade left that baby without both parents. You're officially notified, Elias said quietly, his voice deadly calm, that this conversation is being recorded as evidence of attempted witness intimidation under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 1512. Would you like to revise your statement? Malloy's smile vanished. You think you're clever? You think your badge protects you? This is bigger than you understand. People with real power. No, Elias interrupted. It's exactly as big as I understand. That's what terrifies you. Malloy retreated to his car without another word. Elias watched until the taillights disappeared, then checked his home security feeds. All cameras operational. All angles covered. The attempted arson on Naomi's car had taught him to be prepared. His phone buzzed again. Moreno, her voice tight with controlled anger. Pritchard just issued an emergency injunction. He's blocking our subpoenas on procedural grounds. How long? 3 days minimum for a hearing. Meanwhile, Renshaw's legal team is burying us in paperwork. Motion to dismiss, motion to suppress, motion to seal. They're trying to drown us in red tape until the public pressure fades. Elias looked at his evidence wall, at the faces of dead mothers, at the financial connections and documented patterns. They're scared. They should be. But they're also connected, Elias. Judge Pritchard plays golf with hospital board members. Each delay gives them time to bury evidence deeper, intimidate more witnesses. If we don't move soon, then we change the game, Elias interrupted. He pulled out his other phone, the secure line tied directly to the FBI. Time to call Klein. SAC Dana. Klein answered on the second ring. Ward, you're still suspended. I need 5 minutes. After that, you can extend my suspension or arrest me. Your choice. A long pause. Talk fast. Elias laid it out methodically. The pattern of deaths, the financial connections tying hospital administrators to local officials, the coordinated cover-up involving police and judiciary. He detailed Malloy's threat, Pritchard's obstruction, Renshaw's legal barricade. Finally, he played Hargrove's recorded confession, the doctor's voice dripping with racist assumptions and casual disregard for Black mothers' lives. This isn't just about Naomi anymore, he finished. It's about a system that kills Black mothers for profit and buries anyone who objects. The Bureau can't look away without becoming complicit. The silence stretched. Elias could almost hear Klein weighing career preservation against moral certainty, institutional loyalty against human decency. Send me everything, she said finally. Every recording, every document, every connection. I'll take it upstairs. We'll invoke federal jurisdiction, no local involvement, no conflicts of interest. Thank you. But Ward, Klein's voice hardened, if you're wrong about any of this, if there's even one piece that doesn't check out. I'm not wrong, Elias said. And I have backups of everything. Multiple copies, multiple locations. No single point of failure. Of course you do. Klein sighed. Stay put. Wait for authorization. Do not engage anyone until we move officially. Understood. Understood. Elias ended the call and turned back to his evidence wall. He photographed every document, scanned every note, uploaded every recording to secure servers. Multiple copies, multiple locations. They could come for him, threaten him, even arrest him, but the truth was already distributed too widely to suppress. The baby whimpered softly. Elias lifted his daughter, breathing in that perfect newborn scent, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a mantle. I know, little one, he whispered. I miss her too. But tomorrow we start making it right. He settled into the old rocking chair Naomi had chosen, watching security feeds while his daughter slept. Outside, the night grew deeper. But Elias didn't sleep. He simply rocked and waited, one hand on his service weapon, the other cradling new life born from tragedy. Every few minutes, his phone lit up with notifications. Renshaw's lawyers filing emergency motions. Malloy's car making another pass down the block. Pritchard's office requesting urgent meetings with federal supervisors. The system was scrambling, desperate to maintain control. Let them scramble, Elias thought. The truth was already loose, copied and distributed, and sitting in federal databases where local corruption couldn't touch it. No amount of legal papers or backroom deals could cage it again. Dawn would bring federal agents, warrants, the full weight of the government finally choosing the right side. But until then, Elias kept watch, protecting his daughter and guarding the evidence that would finally give Naomi and all the other mothers the justice they'd been denied. The rocking chair creaked softly. The security monitors glowed. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that her father was building a wall of truth that no one could tear down. And somewhere in the darkness, The people who'd thought themselves untouchable were beginning to understand what it meant to face someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The armored vans hummed in the pre-dawn darkness, their black shapes lined up like waiting predators. Condensation purled on bulletproof glass as federal agents moved with practiced efficiency, checking gear and synchronizing communications. The staging area, a converted warehouse lot 3 blocks from Metropolitan General, bristled with tactical equipment and federal authority. SAC Dana Klein stood straight-backed near the command vehicle, her expression carved from stone. When Elias approached, she held out his badge and credentials without ceremony. "Agent Ward," she said formally, "you are hereby reinstated to active duty, effective immediately." She paused, something softer flickering behind her professional mask. "The Bureau failed you. We should have acted sooner. I should have listened when you first raised concerns instead of ordering you to stand down." Elias accepted his credentials, the familiar weight settling against his chest like armor. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me. Make it count." Inside the command vehicle, Elias's evidence board had been recreated digitally across multiple screens. Red markers highlighted 7 target locations, while timestamps scrolled past in real time. USA Moreno sat at the communications station, coordinating with support teams across the city. "All teams in position," she reported, not looking up from her monitors. "Priya Shah's feeding us server locations now. We'll hit the backups before they know we're coming." Elias studied the tactical overlay. 7 simultaneous raids, the hospital's off-site storage facility, 3 billing vendor offices, the main administration building, and the personal residences of Dr. Hargrove and Gail Renshaw. Each location represented a piece of the conspiracy they'd fought so hard to expose. "All teams sound off," Klein commanded. The responses came rapid fire through the speakers. "Alpha team ready at storage facility. Bravo team positioned at billing, office 1. Charlie team covering hospital approach. Delta team standing by at Hargrove residence. Echo team in position at Renshaw's address." Elias watched the pieces align, remembering all the nights he'd spent connecting these same dots while his daughter slept nearby. Now the full weight of federal law enforcement stood ready to validate every conclusion, every suspicion, every truth he'd protected. Priya Shah's voice crackled through the secure channel. "Primary server room confirmed in sub-basement. Backup arrays in offices 3 and 4. They're running constant deletion cycles, trying to purge everything." "Too late for that," Moreno muttered, typing commands. "Our mirroring programs are already in place. Every file they delete creates a backup we can track." The first rays of sunrise painted the sky in shades of promise as Klein gave the execute order. Her voice was steady, final. "All teams go." Across the city, federal agents moved with synchronized precision. Doors burst open. Warrants were served. Evidence was secured before anyone inside fully understood what was happening. Live feeds filled the command vehicle screens. At the storage facility, agents discovered recently shredded documents, but the pieces were salvageable, and the shredder's electronic log had recorded what was destroyed. In the billing offices, computers whirred with active deletion programs that only preserved more proof of guilt, every keystroke logged, every file tracked. At Renshaw's house, agents found a hastily lit fire in the backyard still smoldering. Half-burned papers fluttered in the morning breeze, patient names and dollar amounts still visible on the fragments. "First footage recovery coming in," announced a tech specialist. The main screen filled with hospital security footage, timestamp matched to Nurse Glenn's notes. The images were crystal clear. Hargrove manually silencing alarms, dismissing staff concerns, delaying critical care. Each frame validated Tessa's courage in speaking up. Each second of video transformed memory into prosecutable evidence. Access logs confirmed, another analyst called out. Multiple manual overrides of monitoring equipment, all tied to Hargrove's credentials. Pattern spans 3 years, focuses on minority patients, correlates with billing adjustments afterward. More data poured in like a flood breaking through a dam. Financial records showed payments flowing between shell companies tied to hospital administrators and local officials. Email chains revealed careful coordination to bury complaints and silence witnesses. Everything Elias had suspected, everything he'd pieced together through grief and determination, was being confirmed in high-resolution detail. "Sir." A junior agent approached with a tablet. "You should see this." The screen showed security footage from Tessa Glenn's attack, clear images of two men breaking into her house. One wore a contractor badge identical to those found in the hospital IT department. They hadn't come to rob her. They'd come to silence her. Facial recognitions already identified both suspects, the agent continued. Former police, currently employed by a security firm contracted to the hospital. Financial records show payments from the same shell companies. Elias nodded, unsurprised. The system protected itself through layers of deniable connections, until those layers were stripped away by federal warrants and forensic accounting. Evidence secured at all primary locations, Klein announced. No successful deletions. No data lost. Full chain of custody maintained. Moreno looked up from her station, fierce satisfaction in her eyes. They really thought they could bury this. All of it. Everyone they hurt. They got used to power, Elias said quietly. Started believing their own lies about who deserved care and who didn't. Thought the system would protect them forever. The command vehicle hummed with activity as data streams converged into an irrefutable narrative. Patient records showing systematic discrimination. Security footage documenting deliberate delays. Financial transactions proving coordination and cover-up. Communication logs revealing consciousness of guilt. Each piece strengthened the others, creating a foundation too solid to shake with legal maneuvering or political pressure. Hospital Administrator Renshaw in custody, reported Charlie Team. No resistance. Found her attempting to access sealed files in her office at 6:47 a.m. Billing office principals detained, added Bravo Team. Multiple servers seized. All encryption broken. Full data recovery in progress. Elias watched the feeds, feeling a weight lift from his chest with each confirmation. The truth wasn't fragile anymore. It wasn't trapped in his grieving memories or buried in manipulated records. It was documented, duplicated, distributed across secure federal servers where local corruption couldn't touch it. A priority alert flashed across the main screen. Moreno straightened, hand pressed to her earpiece. "Confirmation from Delta Team," she announced. "Dr. Preston Hargrove located at Metropolitan General, East Wing, 3rd floor. He's conducting morning rounds." The room stilled. Every eye turned to Elias. "He doesn't know yet," Klein said softly. "Still playing doctor. Still thinking he's untouchable." Elias stood, adjusting his badge. Through the command vehicle's windows, sunrise was painting the city in gold and crimson, the colors of ending and beginning, of night finally giving way to light. "Let's go remind him," he said quietly, "that nobody's untouchable. Not anymore." Sunlight streamed through Metropolitan General's glass entrance, casting long shadows across the busy lobby. Patients filled plastic chairs, flipping through magazines and checking phones, unaware that their ordinary morning was about to become extraordinary. The first hint something was different came from the security guards. They straightened suddenly, hands dropping to radios that had gone mysteriously silent, frequencies jammed by federal equipment. Then the front doors swung wide. Federal agents moved in smooth formation, badges displayed, purpose radiating from every step. No sirens, no shouting, no dramatics, just the quiet authority of justice finally arriving. Patients looked up from their phones. Conversations died mid-sentence. More agents appeared from side entrances, securing exits with practiced efficiency, while others headed for the elevators. On the 3rd floor, Dr. Preston Hargrove stood in an examination room reviewing a chart, his white coat pristine, his posture perfect. Every inch of him radiated the untouchable superiority that had let him decide who deserved care and who could wait, who lived and who died. "As I was saying," he told his patient, "these concerns seem rather premature. First-time mothers often." The door opened. 2 agents in tactical gear stepped in, followed by 3 in suits. Badge flashes caught the fluorescent light. Dr. Preston Hargrove, the lead agent, announced, "You are under arrest for civil rights violations, fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy resulting in death." Hargrove's face flickered between expressions, confusion, indignation, the beginning of genuine fear. "This is absurd. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a respected physician with 30 years. "Yes, sir. We know exactly who you are." The agent moved forward with handcuffs ready. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I demand to speak to my attorney." Hargrove's voice rose, cracking slightly. "This is harassment. This is." The cuffs snapped shut with metallic finality. Down the hall, phones came out as the famous doctor was led past shocked nurses and wide-eyed residents. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" In her top-floor office, Gail Renshaw was mid-sentence in a damage control meeting when her door burst open. Her practiced administrator's smile froze as agents entered with warrant in hand. "Ms. Renshaw, you're under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and fraud." "This is a mistake," she said automatically, PR training kicking in. Everything was handled according to protocol. But her calm cracked as handcuffs appeared. Real panic flooded her face, the kind that came from knowing exactly how much evidence they must have found. Her heels clicked arrhythmically as agents escorted her past the executive suite where she'd orchestrated so many cover-ups, past the conference rooms where she'd convinced families to accept settlements and sign away their right to seek justice. Across town, Detective Vince Malloy stepped out of the precinct, adjusting his jacket with the casual confidence of a man who owned his corner of the world. He made it 3 steps before federal agents surrounded him. "Detective Malloy, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption under color of authority, and witness intimidation. Come on, guys." He tried his friendly mask, spreading his hands reasonably. "We can work this out. Whatever you think happened." The cuffs ended his negotiation. Officers he'd commanded watched from the station steps as he was led to a waiting vehicle, his power evaporating like morning dew. Back in the hospital lobby, staff gathered in clusters, whispering as more arrests followed. IT managers who'd deleted footage, administrators who'd buried complaints, security personnel who'd threatened witnesses. The entire machinery of silence was being dismantled in broad daylight. Elias Ward stood near the information desk, badge visible on his belt, saying nothing. His presence was statement enough. Every person led past in handcuffs represented a piece of the system that had failed Naomi, failed so many others, and assumed they'd never face consequences. Dr. Hargrove emerged from the elevator between 2 agents, his perfect posture now rigid with shock. He scanned the lobby desperately, looking for allies, for escape, for anyone who might still shield him. Then his eyes found Elias. Recognition hit like a physical blow. Hargrove's steps faltered as understanding dawned, not just of who Elias was, but of the full scope of what his arrogance had ignored. Not just a grieving husband, but a federal agent. Not just one death, but a documented pattern. Not just a tragedy to be buried, but justice that had been gathering strength in silence, waiting for this moment. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, questions shouting over each other. But Hargrove couldn't look away from Elias, from the quiet strength that had systematically dismantled his world of privilege and protection. In that moment, the doctor finally felt what his victims had felt, powerless, unheard, at the mercy of forces he couldn't control. Elias met his gaze steadily, badge gleaming in the morning light, neither triumphant nor angry. He didn't need words. The evidence would speak. The truth would speak. Every silenced voice would finally be heard. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. Hargrove tried one last time to summon his authority, to demand rights, to invoke lawyers and threaten consequences. But his voice shrank under the weight of reality. His reputation couldn't save him. His connections couldn't hide him. His power was paper-thin, and it was burning away in the morning light. As agents guided Hargrove toward the waiting vehicle, his eyes locked on Elias one final time. In that gaze was the desperate realization of a man who'd thought himself untouchable, finally understanding the price of his choices. The doors closed behind him with quiet finality, separating him forever from the kingdom of impunity he'd built on others' pain. Elias stood in the lobby as the morning sun streamed through the windows, his badge catching the light. Around him, the hospital continued its work, but something fundamental had changed. The silence that protected cruelty had been broken. The system that enabled discrimination had been exposed. And every mother whose pain had been dismissed, whose life had been deemed less valuable, would finally have their truth acknowledged. Justice, Elias thought, didn't always look like dramatic confrontations or raised voices. Sometimes it looked like handcuffs clicking shut on a Tuesday morning. Sometimes it looked like federal agents reading rights to people who'd thought themselves above the law. Sometimes it looked like the quiet determination to keep pushing until the truth had nowhere left to hide. He touched his badge, feeling its weight, thinking of Naomi and knowing she would have been proud, not of the arrests themselves, but of the patient, methodical pursuit of justice that valued every life equally. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but accountability. Not just punishment, but change. Spring sunlight bathed the new community clinic's facade, warming the crisp morning air with the promise of renewal. A bright banner stretched across the entrance, its letters bold and dignified. Naomi Ward Maternal Care Initiative. The crowd gathered on the lawn represented a cross-section of the community that had fought for this moment. Medical professionals in pristine white coats, local families with children playing in the grass, activists who'd amplified voices demanding change, and officials who'd finally chosen the right side of history. Nurse Tessa Glenn sat in a wheelchair near the podium, still recovering from her attack, but radiating quiet strength. Her hands rested on the ceremonial ribbon, fingers tracing the silk fabric. The past months had left visible marks, a slight tremor in her movements, careful turns of her head, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. Dr. Aidan Park stood among the new clinic staff, his posture reflecting both pride and hard-won wisdom. The young resident who'd once hesitated under Hargrove's shadow had found his voice. His testimony at the trial had been devastating, describing the culture of fear that prevented junior staff from challenging dangerous decisions. Now he would help build something different, a place where speaking up was expected, not punished. Federal officials clustered near the steps, their presence a reminder that this change was enforced, not suggested. The consent decrees they carried weren't just paper, they were binding promises with real consequences. Every hospital in the region would face new protocols, independent oversight, and accountability that couldn't be buried in bureaucracy. Elias Ward stood slightly apart from the crowd, his daughter secure in his arms. She'd grown in the months since the trial, healthy and strong despite the trauma of their first moments together, with Naomi's expressive eyes and her father's stubborn determination already visible in that tiny face. Watching the gathering, Elias felt the familiar ache of Naomi's absence. Not the raw agony of early grief, but a steady awareness of all she should have seen, all the joy she'd been robbed of experiencing. The ceremony began with introductions and acknowledgments. A community board member detailed the sweeping changes mandated by federal intervention, independent oversight panels with real authority, mandatory bias training with consequences for noncompliance, clear escalation protocols that couldn't be overridden by a single doctor's ego or an administrator's bottom line. But perhaps most importantly, she continued, her voice swelling with emotion, we're creating pathways for the next generation. She outlined the scholarship program established in Naomi's name, funded by assets seized during the investigation. These scholarships will support Black and Brown students pursuing careers in nursing, midwifery, and maternal health care. We're not just changing rules, we're changing who gets to make them, who gets to shape the future of care in our community. Applause rippled through the crowd. Tessa Glenn wheeled forward for the ribbon cutting, her hands steady now as she lifted the scissors. But before making the cut, she spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the lawn. I spent 30 years watching the same stories repeat, she said. Watching good people stay quiet because speaking up felt impossible. Watching families get buried in paperwork instead of getting justice. Watching mothers die because the color of their skin made their pain seem less real, less urgent, less worthy of our time and resources. She met Elias's eyes briefly. Naomi Ward wasn't the first mother we lost to this system. But because of her husband's refusal to back down, because of everyone who finally chose truth over comfort, she will be one of the last. The scissors flashed in the sunlight. The ribbon floated apart in two pieces. Applause erupted, honest and heartfelt. Dr. Park stepped forward to explain the clinic's approach. His voice had gained confidence since the trial, carrying the authority of someone who'd learned the cost of silence and chosen never to be silent again. Every patient who comes through these doors will be heard, he stated firmly. Every concern will be taken seriously. Every symptom will be evaluated without assumption or prejudice. Every life will be treated as equally precious. He gestured to the diverse staff assembled behind him, black, brown, white, immigrant, native-born, reflecting the community they would serve. We've built a team that understands cultural competency isn't just a buzzword. It's the difference between life and death. It's about recognizing that bias lives in systems and assumptions, not just in obvious hatred. It's about creating space where every mother feels safe enough to speak up and knows she'll be believed. The federal consent decree administrator outlined specific changes with the precision of someone who'd seen too many reforms fail through lack of enforcement. Mandatory response times for maternal distress, no more discretionary delays. Required documentation of all monitoring decisions, no more silent alarm shutoffs. Clear chains of accountability that couldn't be buried in hospital politics. Independent review boards with real power to investigate and discipline. These changes aren't suggestions, she emphasized, her voice hard with determination. They're legally binding commitments with federal oversight. Any facility that fails to comply will face immediate consequences, including loss of federal funding and potential criminal prosecution. Representatives from local medical schools announced partnerships with the clinic, creating training rotations that would emphasize equity alongside clinical skills. Future doctors and nurses would learn here that every patient deserved dignity, that pain had no color, that lives were equally valuable regardless of race or background or insurance status. A community advocate detailed the new oversight board structure, how it would review complaints, monitor compliance, maintain independence from hospital administration, and ensure that families had real recourse when care fell short. Finally, it was Elias's turn to speak. He approached the podium slowly, still holding his daughter, who reached toward the microphone with curious fingers. The crowd quieted, recognizing the weight of the moment. He looked out at the gathered faces, some familiar from the long months of investigation and trial, others new allies in the fight for change that would continue long after today's ceremony ended. Naomi believed in dignity, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. She believed every person deserved to be heard, to be valued, to be treated with basic human respect. That wasn't idealism for her, it was a fundamental understanding of what it means to be human. He adjusted his hold on the baby, who grabbed his tie with determined fists. She wasn't just my wife. She was a force for good in this world. Intelligent, compassionate, unwilling to accept that some lives mattered less than others. She spent her career advocating for people society often overlooked, and in the end, she became one of them. His voice caught slightly, but he pushed through. This clinic isn't about vengeance. It's not about punishment, though those who caused harm have faced consequences. It's about finally building what should have existed all along, a place where every mother's pain matters, where every family's fears are heard, where no one is dismissed because of their race or background or the assumptions others make about them. The baby made a soft sound, drawing gentle laughter from the crowd. Elias smiled slightly, the expression transforming his face. My daughter will grow up knowing her mother's name stands for change, he continued. That her life, though cut short, forced a broken system to finally face its failures. That her memory isn't just grief, it's action. It's accountability. It's the promise that other mothers will live because of her death. He paused, looking at the banner bearing Naomi's name. She would have loved this. Not the attention or recognition, but the possibility, the chance to save lives, to prevent other families from experiencing this kind of loss. That's who she was. That's what her legacy will be. The applause began slowly, then swelled, rolling across the lawn in waves. Tessa Glenn wiped tears from her eyes. Dr. Park stood straighter, his expression reflecting renewed purpose. Federal officials nodded in solemn acknowledgement of promises made and kept. Parents held their children closer, remembering their own close calls, their own moments of not being heard, understanding how close they'd come to becoming statistics themselves. Elias stood beneath the banner bearing Naomi's name, their daughter reaching toward the sunlight streaming down. The applause continued, carrying not just approval but commitment, a community's promise to remember, to vigilantly guard these hard-won changes, to ensure Naomi's legacy remained alive in more than just words. Evening settled over the quiet neighborhood, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and gold. Elias walked along the familiar sidewalk, his baby secured against his chest in a carrier, their steps keeping rhythm with the crickets beginning their nightly song. The same route felt different now. Houses that had witnessed his raw grief months ago now saw a man changed, not healed exactly, but transformed. Like steel forged in fire, the pain hadn't lessened so much as it had been reshaped into something purposeful, something that could bear weight and create structure. His daughter stirred, making those soft, contented sounds that still caught his breath sometimes. Tiny fingers curled around the fabric of his shirt, trusting and secure. "Your mama loved evenings like this," Elias said softly. "She'd sit on our porch and tell me all the little things most people miss. How the light hit the trees just so. How you could tell the season was changing by which birds were singing. She made the ordinary feel sacred." A woman watering her garden waved as they passed, one of Hargrove's former patients who'd survived his negligence but carried the scars, physical and emotional. Her presence in the neighborhood was another reminder of how the world had shifted, not through shouting or violence, but through the steady pressure of truth finally spoken aloud. "The thing about power," Elias continued his quiet conversation with his child, "is that it's not about who has the loudest voice or the biggest title. It's about who refuses to look away when something's wrong. Your mama understood that. She never let injustice become background noise." He thought of Tessa Glenn, who'd risked everything to slip him that first crucial piece of evidence. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who just keep showing up, day after day, doing what's right even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when it would be easier to stay quiet. They passed the local police station, its windows reflecting the sunset. Detective Malloy's desk sat empty now, his badge surrendered after the full extent of his corruption emerged. The new captain had already implemented changes, mandatory reporting protocols, clear documentation requirements, real consequences for officers who abused their authority. Small changes, maybe, but they added up. A light breeze rustled through the maple trees lining the street. Elias remembered his own rage in those early days, the temptation to answer cruelty with violence, to make Hargrove feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But that path would have betrayed everything Naomi believed in. "Your mama taught me something important," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of memory. "She showed me that real strength isn't about making people afraid. It's about making things better, even when that's harder than making things hurt. It's about building something that lasts after the anger fades." The baby yawned, settling deeper against his chest. These evening walks had become their ritual. In the beginning, an escape from the emptiness of the house, now more like meditation, a time to reflect on how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. A group of medical students passed by, heading toward the bus stop. They wore the distinctive lanyards of a Naomi Ward scholarship program, their animated discussion carrying fragments about patient advocacy and community health. One of them recognized Elias and nodded respectfully, not with pity, but with understanding of what his fight had achieved. "Change doesn't happen all at once," Elias continued. "It's like building a case, piece by piece, fact by fact, until the truth becomes too solid to ignore. Sometimes justice looks like paperwork and meetings and really boring rules about response times and documentation. But those rules? They save lives. They turned onto their street as the first stars began appearing. Porch lights winked on, creating pools of warmth in the growing dusk. Their own house stood quiet but welcoming, Naomi's flower boxes still blooming with the perennials she'd planted, purple and gold matching the evening sky. I used to think being strong meant never showing fear, Elias admitted softly. But your mama knew better. She taught me that real courage is feeling afraid, and speaking up anyway. It's using whatever power you have, whatever platform you stand on, to protect people who need protecting. The baby had drifted to sleep, peaceful against his heartbeat. Elias paused at the end of their driveway, looking up at the deepening sky where stars were emerging one by one. The world hadn't magically become fair or kind. Racism hadn't vanished. Prejudice hadn't dissolved. Injustice hadn't surrendered. But something fundamental had shifted. The silence that protected Hargrove had been broken. The system that enabled him had been exposed. The pattern that killed Naomi had been interrupted. Not through violence or vengeance, but through the patient, relentless application of truth and law. Through people choosing courage over comfort, justice over convenience, change over complicity. Your mama changed things, Elias whispered, carefully ascending their porch steps. Not by being the loudest or the angriest, but by being absolutely clear about what was right. And when people tried to bury that truth, when they tried to make her death just another statistic, we didn't let them. We kept digging, kept pushing, kept insisting that her life mattered. The porch swing moved gently in the evening breeze, Naomi's favorite spot where she'd spent so many evenings planning community programs and dreaming up ways to help people. It didn't stand empty now so much as waiting, holding space for the work that would continue. Naomi. Elias said her name into the quiet air, feeling not the raw edge of loss but the solid foundation of purpose. We did it. Not just legal victory, though that mattered. But something deeper, we proved that justice isn't just a word. It's a choice made real through action. It's refusing to let power hide behind silence. It's insisting that every life deserves dignity. He settled into the swing with his sleeping daughter, the gentle rocking motion as natural as breathing now. Through the window, he could see the edge of his evidence wall, mostly dismantled but with one section preserved, the photos of Naomi, Jasmine, Keisha, and the other mothers whose names he'd learned, whose families he'd met, whose losses had become part of his mission. They would be remembered now. Not as statistics or complications or unfortunate outcomes, but as people whose lives mattered, whose deaths demanded accountability, whose legacy would be measured in the mothers who lived because the system finally changed. If you enjoyed this story, Elias said softly, not to his daughter but to Naomi, to the evening, to the universe that had taken so much and yet left him with purpose, then help us make sure it matters. Support the changes. Speak up when you see injustice. Refuse to let silence protect cruelty. That's how we honor the ones we've lost, by making sure their deaths weren't in vain. The stars grew brighter as darkness deepened. His daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her father had just finished telling a story that was both ending and beginning, the story of loss transformed into legacy, of grief hardened into determination, of one man's refusal to let injustice have the final word. Somewhere in the city, the Naomi Ward Maternal Care Initiative would open its doors tomorrow morning. Dr. Park would treat his first patients with the protocols they'd fought for. Tessa Glenn would train new nurses in advocacy and courage. Scholarship recipients would begin their education knowing they were part of something larger than themselves. And here, on this porch where Naomi used to sit and dream, Elias Ward held their daughter close and allowed himself something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would be perfect, but the hard-won hope that came from seeing change actually happen, from watching a broken system finally face consequences, from knowing that speaking truth to power could still matter when enough people refused to be silenced. "We're going to be okay," he whispered to his sleeping child. "Your mama's still with us. In this clinic, in these changes, in the lives that will be saved because she lived and because people refused to forget her." The porch swing creaked softly. The evening deepened, and Elias Ward sat in the darkness, watching stars emerge one by one, each point of light a small victory against the night. Justice had been served. But more importantly, change had begun. And that, he knew, was the legacy Naomi would have chosen. Not vengeance, but transformation. Not just punishment for the guilty, but protection for the innocent. Not just remembering the dead, but saving the living. That was worth everything they'd fought for. That was worth the pain, the struggle, the nights of doubt, and days of grinding determination. That was how love endured, not just in memory but in action. Not just in grief but in change.